Grampian Nation, welcome back. Here's another edition of the Grampian, where Grandpa chats with champions. It is my pleasure today to introduce you to the dean of the business school where I graduated from. I don't know if he's going to want to hang out with too much with me, but we'll be back in a minute and we'll see if Dr. Timothy O'Keefe from the great state of North Dakota will chat with champions.
In 2013, I coined the name Grampian, and I gave it to your host, Jim Tracy.
And what do you go by? I mean, is it Dean? Is it Doctor? Is it Timothy? Is it Tim?
Just call me Tim. Call me Tim. I'm a small town boy from North Dakota, and I'm not comfortable with anything but my first name.
All right. Well, Tim, thanks for that. I appreciate that. And thank you for joining us on the Grampian. You are Dean of the Beacom School of Business at the University of South Dakota.
Yes,
but
sir.
You didn't start there. You said a kid from the country, you grew up, you stayed true to your Midwest roots. Tell us about your journey to the deanship at USD. I guess start with your childhood. I mean, Crystal.
Start with my what? Excuse me, Jim.
Your Red River Valley start, and I think Crystal, North Dakota, population 116.
Yeah, you looked that up, did you?
Oh yeah,
it was about 250 when I grew up. Half of them my family, and about half of them my wife's, and we're now part of that overlap that nobody talks about, I guess. But it was a great place to grow up. It was a farming community. My dad was not a farmer; he was a carpenter, electrician, plumber. He called himself a jerk of all trades. But so I grew up working with my hands, working with people, and just trying to make ends meet like a lot of families do.
Sure.
It was I actually worked my way through high school, worked my way through college. When I did the typical small town thing and played every sport that was available to keep myself out of trouble. And then when I graduated from high school, I went to Mayville State University for 4 years, where I was student body president my senior year. Played football for 2 years, which probably I didn't shine really as a football player. Some would say I'm just too nice a guy. Some might not, but I got injured my second year playing football, and decided I enjoyed being able to move more than I enjoyed playing football. So I quit that. I quit that as a life's adventure.
Yeah, there's always somebody
after
a little
graduating
bigger and
from
faster and stronger, isn't there?
Yeah. After graduating from Mayville State, I became a computer programmer analyst for the North Dakota Higher Education Computer Network for 2 years, and ended up as the low man on the totem pole, having to teach a group of administrators at North Dakota State University how to write their own programs in a language called SAS. And none of the senior people wanted to do it. And so I spent 3 days teaching people that I didn't feel worthy to be in the same room with how to write some code, and thoroughly loved it. And as luck would have it, my old alma mater, Mayville State, was looking for a new faculty member back in the days when information systems faculty were as rare as hen's teeth, and they hired me. And I've pretty much been in higher ed ever since. That led to an MBA at Morehead State University, eventually a PhD at University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, where I was fortunate to be assisted in writing an award-winning dissertation, and then moved to the University of North Dakota around the year 2000, 1999.
Yeah. So you were a Razorback.
I was a Razorback. Suey Pig. Yeah.
Hey, that's a little, and you talked about football a little bit. I'm going to bring that up because the USD Coyotes were had tied this year for first place in the Missouri Valley Conference, and then made it to the semis. Not quite the level of our brethren of the Bison of North Dakota, but we will reluctantly give a tip of cap to those guys after this last weekend. However, you brought some programs into the University of North Dakota that are unusual. You were, by really any measure, ahead of your time. When you talk about entrepreneurship, prior to there being entrepreneurs, which is our love in business, how do you do that? How do you convince stoic, stodgy business people that maybe the guys who are running the businesses ought to be able to think quickly and move quickly and stay nimble and that kind of thing?
So uh, I really can't say that I brought the program in, Jim. It was there as a department, a small department in the College of Business and Public Administration for a number of years. Struggled to kind of gain its footing,
Hmm.
and there was an advisory board for the Center for Innovation in Grand Forks, North Dakota, that convinced the State Board of Higher Education to create a school of entrepreneurship. So it was this unfunded mandate. Create a school. Here's no money. Uh, and so I approached the chair of the entrepreneurship department and the chair of industrial technology. Uh, I was chair of information systems and professional communication, business communication, I think it was called. Uh, and I said, we should combine forces. My department will have that digital soft side, the service side of entrepreneurship covered.
Hmm.
Industrial technology will have the physical product side covered. And of course, entrepreneurship, you're the foundation of it all. And we made a proposal to the provost, and he approved that. And so I was then uh, anointed, I guess would be the right word, to be the executive director and chair of that new school, which I did for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting learning process in merging different cultures, in promoting change. I will not begin to tell you that I didn't make some massive mistakes in that process, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it just did nothing more than increase my passion for administration. I'd been a chair for about 12 years before that, and an
Uh-huh.
MBA director for 5 years during that period of time. And I love administration and how I can, through that role, help people be successful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. One of the things when you talk about being successful, one of the things I noticed is that you brought virtual education to TV, if you will. Before there was streaming, before there was this and before there was that, before there was COVID, you were
Mhm.
bringing virtual education out to rural areas. How
Yes.
did you, how do you come by that when you're like decades? This was 2008, 10, 12, somewhere in there
Some of that,
before.
Jim, was just a recognizing an opportunity. And being an information systems professor, and I owned a company called Commark Incorporated where we developed uh, information systems, excuse me, sorry about that,
No
information
worries.
systems for businesses that were based on internet technology. So I was heavily involved in that, both physically and mentally, and became MBA director during that period of time, where we were actually delivering the MBA over a closed circuit video network. You could attend classes in person in Grand Forks. You could attend classes in person in a video enabled room in Bismarck, or in a video enabled room at Dickinson State University in Dickinson, North Dakota.
Uh-huh.
So we were covering the whole state, but you still had to physically drive to a location where there was a television setup, right? And what we found was that we had very much saturated the market of people who wanted to drive
Yeah.
and sit at Bismarck State College for 3 hours on a Tuesday night or whatever.
Yeah.
And we started to see some enrollment decreases. So then I did propose that we go to what's called a hybrid model, where people could just sit in their office or sit at home on their computer and attend class real time at
That's
the
awesome.
University of North Dakota. And it carried some technical challenges back in the day. We had to kind of limit the number of students that could be online, but it was a huge success. And
Yeah.
we increased enrollment again, increased our reach. We actually had a student graduate from the University of North Dakota from Colombia in South
Really?
America who had never set
Wow.
foot on our campus, which that was a very proud day for me.
That's
Uh,
crazy cool. That's how, so you're ahead of your time. How much has it changed since then? I mean,
it,
now your reach through the USD Beacom School of Business
right.
is gargantuan.
Yeah. The change now is we've gone away from the synchronous delivery in a lot of cases, or we can actually be even more flexible. Uh, the way I the way I describe it is it's education in a manner, in a place where the student needs it at the moment.
Wow.
Easier said than done, but we can literally teach a course where students can come in remotely, synchronous, and be in the classroom and ask questions. We can record that class while we are teaching it, and students can look at it later, whether they were in the class or not, and attend the class asynchronously. And we can deliver to that student an education in a manner that works for them. And the
That's
student
really
gets to
cool.
decide, rather than for the last several hundred years, we'll say, the university decided where the student would go to school.
Yeah, for sure. Say, one of the things that I read about you, and because you're not a doctor first, you're not a dean first, you're Tim, and Tim was an entrepreneur, has owned a business, has come alongside. But one of the quotes that fascinated me is, I'm going to quote you as, and this is from probably a decade ago. Effective leadership is as much and possibly more about the character of the leader than it is about the performance of the duties. That really resonated with me because people, especially sometimes in academia, are more worried about, their credentials rather than their character. And you're the flip side of that. Tell us where that comes from.
Uh, I have to say that it started with growing up in Crystal, North Dakota. Uh, when you are, in some ways, you can't take what you learned as a child out of your value system, right? But I will give that a nod to my parents on that one. Both came from very large families. My mom was oldest of 11. My dad was, I think, number 7 of 12.
Oh, wow, that's
Uh,
terrific.
Both families, of course, struggled to make ends meet, and I was fortunate to be raised by two incredibly hardworking people who taught me that it's who you are, not what you do,
Yeah.
that matters. And so, uh, I guess my position as I really struggle with the word leader, to be honest. That's like doctor or whatever. I am the luckiest man alive to be the dean of
Yeah.
the Beacom School of Business. It's a privilege every day I come to work. But people have to be able to count on me telling them the truth. They have to be able to count on me being as transparent as I possibly can be, and they have to be able to count on me to listen to them and have a constructive conversation. I'm not always successful in any of those things.
Yeah.
Uh, I have often said the hardest part of my job is that in many ways you're not allowed to be human. But I think people know who I am and they trust who I am. And you can't have a conversation on those higher order things like qualifications and discipline, content, and things like that unless they trust you in the first place. Trust is the foundation of everything, and that's part. Now, your character is what builds trust, Jeff.
Right
So
on. And, coming from a place where we had, we started with 2 employees, me and my son, and we ended up with a couple of hundred across 4 states and even working internationally. One of the sayings that really jumped out at me early in my career was transparency fosters credibility. And if transparency fosters credibility, how do you make that take place in an environment where you're incorporating like this disparate group of educators and the uneducated and trying to put them together
yeah,
without conflict and discord?
it's very difficult, and I will say we've had our share of conflict. People have different perspectives on what's important. They have different perspectives on what our goals are. Part of my job is to set those goals, but that doesn't mean everybody agrees with them. Uh, and I set them with my executive team, but even in those meetings, we don't always agree, and ultimately, it's my job to make sometimes the tough decision. But ideally, you foster a lot of conversation, and I think the important thing is that people feel they've had a chance to be heard. uh, they've had a chance for input, and the most important thing that can happen is that let me put it this way: the most important input to that process is that people are open to
Yeah,
listen, open to learn. That isn't always the case, as you well know, but I think the opportunity for that to happen is what I have to create. In the end, it's my responsibility and I embrace that.
So how do you drive that down through your department chairs and into your professors and into your associate professors that there is a need
Right.
to be transparent in the academic situation that they find
Well,
themselves in?
I'll tell you a story about that, Jim. When I arrived at at the University of South Dakota, I the first thing you do is I show me my budget, right? Where's the money? Because part of my job is to manage the money and to stay out of an orange jumpsuit. And so I, I wanted to see what, state funding, what about foundation funding, and I discovered that none of my executive team had any idea what we had in terms of foundation funding. They had no idea what portion of our budget was covered by state funding versus tuition. Uh, the culture here had not encouraged that sharing of information. So that literally the first thing I did uh, for my executive team was bring in our budget partner from from we call it SLAGL from central administration, and had him share our budget. And then I brought in two people from the University Foundation, and I had them show the chairs and my associate deans literally every foundation fund that we had and which department or which discipline they were assigned to. So they knew that's a constraint, right?
Yeah.
Your finances are a constraint within which you have to live. They didn't know what the constraints were, so that's part of my way of creating transparency. Is this information is available for everyone.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And when I talk about appropriate transparency, that means when I show you the budget, I don't want you digging in and finding out how many lunches I bought last year for donors, right? That's not it. But it's really about, how well are we positioned? When I say we're tight on funds this year, you can believe that because I've shown you the
Hmm.
funds. When I just recently had to buy a bunch of new furniture because it's 15 years old in the building. Well, where did that money come from? I will show you where that money came from.
Yeah.
That helps people know that you're telling them the truth if you say I can't afford that or I don't have a fund for that. That makes things a lot easier. They don't walk into your office saying he's not telling me the truth.
Yeah, kind of laying it on the line. In today's business culture, there's a tendency, and I've lived through this, where the focus is on EBITDA or where cash is king or where this is that, and this is the other thing. But what you're telling me is that you've returned the focus to the people. Is that kind of accurate? Where did that
Yes,
philosophy come from?
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Jim, because I even said during my interview for this position that we have the pendulum has swung way too far to the cash is king, profit is everything. Uh, at the most fundamental level, you have to make more than you spend.
Good practice.
Yeah, you don't survive without that. And I apologize, I'm not looking at the camera very well. I'm not good at this,
That's
but
okay. No, you're doing great, man.
I I truly believe that receiving an education at a school like the Beacom School of Business is a privilege. And the success that comes from that you earn, but it's also an outcome of that privilege. And so I think it's incumbent upon us as educators to try to infuse through the educational process that there's more to success than money.
Mm,
That's just the bare minimum. In fact, maybe doesn't even define it for you, and that's okay.
yeah.
Success is really how have you made the world a better place? And if you do that through your finances, that's fine. If you do it through volunteering, that's fine. If you do it through the way you operate your business, that is fine. But one of the highest privileges of my job is working with, for example, business leaders in Sioux Falls who have just made South Dakota a better place.
Yeah.
And yeah, their businesses are successful. And yep, some of them are very wealthy and very successful. You would not know that when you meet them. They
Yeah.
recognize that their success on some level is a privilege, that on some level they've been lucky. Yes, they've worked hard and they've earned it. But they're at a point where they want to start giving back. And it is such a privilege to work with those folks. And I want our students to leave here knowing that that's a part of life's journey that's really important. It's
Yeah.
not just about whether or not it's a positive number on the bottom of the income statement.
So let me make an assumption then. You're trying to craft leaders rather than
Yes,
spouters of
sir.
knowledge.
Yes, sir.
It's often been said that knowledge is power, but actually wisdom is power, and wisdom is simply the application of knowledge. How do you make that transfer from a business school environment to your new graduate who's walking into Acme
Sure.
Construction or Acme Manufacturing? How do you make that translate that leadership message?
Yeah, and I would say, Jim, that wisdom is a combination of that knowledge and an appropriate application of your value system.
Yeah,
And that is that is difficult to quantify, yet we make sure that we infuse ethics throughout the curriculum. We're actually required to assess ethics on each discipline's level. So we spend a lot of time talking about ethics and where that fits into the business process, which in my mind is everywhere. We also have an ethics course that every student is required to take that is separate from what we infuse into the curriculum. But I will say it's something you can encourage. It's something you can reward, but it's not necessarily something you can directly teach.
yeah.
Some of that is just what is in the heart and in the soul of that individual. Our job, in my mind, is to foster that growth, foster that expansion of our worldview and our place in it. Uh, as I've gotten older and realized just how tiny I am in the scheme of things, I actually feel more privileged and in some ways more powerful
Yeah.
to make a difference
Yeah.
because I have to look at this wide expanse of people I'm privileged to work with and the economy I'm a part of right now and what can be my role there. It's a more realistic view and therefore I can be more realistic about what my influence can be.
And it's certainly a lot easier to mandate morality than it is to model morality than it is to mandate it.
Yes, sir.
I got that
Do not
backwards
mandate
right away.
morality. Yeah, yeah.
So, as I look forward in having interviewed some folks who just are fresh out of school and come into our businesses, it was often put on display to me how not ready, and these were not USD graduates, but but graduates sometimes are not ready for the workplace. What silly mistakes do some of your students make that you would, if you had like a one-on-one with them, where you'd caution them, hey, that might not be the greatest idea, and I can save you some grief.
Right, right. Um, I see the biggest mistake students make uh, almost universally is they don't get involved.
Hmm?
They think that they are, and of course they are here to go to school, but they're not only here to go to school. They will spend the smallest number of hours. Let's assume they graduate in 4 years. The smallest number of hours they will spend on anything is sitting in class. They will spend more time in their residence hall or their apartment. They will spend more time walking around campus, sitting at, doing things like sitting in the coffee shop, which, you sum them all together. We can always find individual things that'll be less than sitting in class, but sum them all together. Their out of class time is much larger than their in class time.
Yeah.
Make better use of that. Actually study, but then get involved in some things. When my two daughters went to school, I said you should get involved in three things. One, get involved in a group that is associated with your discipline that you're studying, a student organization. Get involved with an organization that does public good. One of my daughters took spring break and traveled to Texas, and they painted old people's houses and cleaned up yards and things over her spring break, and I was so proud of her for that.
Awesome.
And the other is just get involved in something fun. Find some, if you want to play intramural volleyball, if you want to, get involved in the chess club or Dungeons and Dragons, I don't care what it is. Get involved in something fun and meet as many people as you can. Meet as many people from different cultures as you can, different religious backgrounds as you can, different geographic backgrounds as you can, and understand, learn that they're no different than you are. They just want to be safe. They want to be happy. They want to be loved. They want to make a living.
There you go. There you
And
go.
that to me, the greatest portion of a residential undergraduate education is that part that happens outside of class.
Yeah.
So embrace that and get what you can out of it.
As I look back on my career at USD, I had a couple of meetings with Dean Clement, who is just a favorite of mine. I have to admit it openly. One was a good meeting and one was a not so good meeting. And he handled both of those with equal grace. One was on the heels of a meeting with Professor Milo McCabe, who let me know that my enthusiasm and attendance was probably lacking at a 7 a.m. class, professor of economics. But when I went into the dean's office on a couple of occasions, he always impressed on me that I should adopt the folks who were teaching me as
Yes.
mentors. And I was like, wait a minute, these are the guys who were like paid to intimidate me. I'm in married student housing and I'm slinging drinks at Leo's at night. So why would I have time to go and adopt them as mentors? I mean, but there was a lot of wisdom there.
Yeah.
Can you? And I know that your history is one of really embracing, totally embracing mentorship. Can you talk
Hmm.
about that a bit?
Yes. Uh, and I'm glad you brought that up because when we've all been students, right? And how intimidating professors can be. And there is a culture in some places where it is about intimidation and it is about showing students that I know more than you do, and it's an individual thing for some faculty, and it's institutional in other ways. Uh, uh, what professors bring to the table for students beyond the academic discipline that they teach is life experience and perspective that it's harder to
Mm,
have when you're young. You don't realize it necessarily when you're young, but I do think that everybody should try to find a mentor. Uh, I have
yeah,
one. I'm 65 years old. I was born in 50. I have a mentor. Uh, you need someone to bounce things off once in a while. Sometimes you just need someone to vent to, and they'll say, "Okay, you're overreacting," or "Let me give you some advice." Uh, Everyone needs that, and you need to seek that out and find someone that
yeah,
works for you. And it is, and I think our faculty recognize it's a privilege to be a mentor. And we have business people who will mentor students and see it as the privilege and responsibility that it is. But what a mentor does for you is help you keep things in perspective.
for sure.
And
So not only find one, go be one. After you've got a little experience, go be a mentor
yep,
to somebody.
yep, yep.
Important.
That's a
Yeah,
great way to give back. And it's a great way to create a lifelong friend.
yeah, for
So,
sure, for
and I
sure.
will say,
Hey,
this, Jim. I will add this. Uh, you talked about students feeling intimidated by professors, or that's what you're going to be intimidated. Uh, I believe in what's called the pedagogy of kindness, and so it's really not about getting in front of students and impressing them with your knowledge. Uh, that happens anyway because if you're not really knowledgeable at your discipline, you shouldn't be in front of the classroom. But it's about making the student feel welcomed and making them feel safe
mm,
and never making them feel condescended to or unworthy. And so there's ways to
mm,
react to a student question. There's ways to react to a student concern where you start with kindness. It doesn't mean you have to be nice all the time, right? You can deliver some tough messages, but you can do it with compassion, with understanding, and with kindness that makes them feel heard, understood, and still appropriately uh, measured.
yeah. So speaking of that, I mean, we talk about great coaches all the time, especially with the Vikings coming up for and going to play in a Super Bowl. We hope.
Oh, they're going to win it.
But if you look at yeah, exactly. I hope so. But if you look at it, who was the best boss you ever had?
Best boss I ever had? This is
Sure.
going to sound. I just talked about this morning, Jim. Funny that you asked this question. Uh, I'm going to give you two answers to that. The first, when I was first a faculty member at Mayville State University, there was a vice president for academic affairs who was a tyrant of a man. Uh, but you always knew where you stood with him. And what I learned from him is you stand behind your people no matter what. And then once you stood behind them, if they've messed up, you bring them into a room privately and you chew them out. You jack them up. You straighten them out.
There
Uh,
you go.
and I respected him for that. And for the entirety of my career, I don't know that I had another boss that was like that. supervisor, and he was extreme. But now I will say, in all honesty, I just said it this morning. The best person I have worked for in my career is Dr. Kurt Hackemer, who's the provost at USD. He has
Okay.
tremendous
Awesome.
perspective on the institution. He's got history there. He's measured. He stays calm. He listens. You can have conversations with him that are difficult, yet at the end you leave feeling like you've reached some sort of a consensus. Uh, a dean's life is a function of, in many ways, how good their provost is, and uh, this is the best job I've ever had when it comes to that, no question.
Awesome. Well, good. I hope you're not going anywhere. But when we talk about, both of us being, let's see, 65 or so, I guess the
Approximately,
question I
yeah,
have,
yeah.
somewhere in that area, the question I have is, what is the thing on your bucket list today that would surprise the people that are on your staff?
Professionally,
Professionally, personally, both. I don't care.
uh,
We got all day. We're on a
yeah,
podcast.
I uh, I see myself as a builder, Jim. I was real clear when I interviewed for this job that I'm not a person who comes in and just sort of keeps the wheels on the bus turning, right? Uh, we sometimes need to build a different road for the bus. Uh, and so if I had a bucket list, uh, it's a long list. Uh, I really would like to make the Beacom School a much more successful place for Native American underserved students. I have a particular passion for
Mm,
that. I worked with the Native American Center, what they call the American Indian Center, at UND when I was in the School of Entrepreneurship, and thoroughly enjoyed that effort. And there are unique challenges and opportunities there. But I've gotten very heavily involved with the Native American Cultural Center at USD, and am trying to create an easier on ramp for Native American students here. That's a big bucket list item for me. Uh, Part of my job here is to become more involved in Sioux Falls and to
hmm
help make the USD Sioux Falls campus, which used to be, I think, the university center up there, uh, more successful. I would love to leave my deanship someday with that place just humming and just hitting on all cylinders. So we
Yeah.
just recently had an executive MBA approved that'll be delivered in Sioux Falls. We're going to be delivering the Master's of Business Administration in person up in Sioux Falls. There are some other plans I've got for graduate education in Sioux Falls. And ultimately, I would love to see, particularly a big part of graduate education in the Beacom School, be in Sioux Falls and make that a center for workforce development, professional development, uh, meet the people where they are again. On a
Right
personal
on.
level,
Right on.
I have grandkids that I would like to spend more time with. I've got a good friend in
Yeah.
Montana who's a rock climber. I want to climb what's called the waltz someday with him without dying. I got to lose about 40 pounds
Okay.
before I do that. But, you know, uh,
Same here. Well, on my birthday this year, I'm going to climb a tower. So I was been in the tower business for a lot of years, and we're going to climb some
okay,
towers. So
like the wind towers.
us old guys, got to stay alive and do it. Well, actually, these are
Okay,
communication
yeah, yeah,
towers. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So okay. So as we do on most all the podcasts, we close them out by having you give a piece of advice to a young person. Maybe you're the version of Tim that was 18 years old and looking out and needed some career advice. What life advice or career advice would you offer a young person that was say 18 years old?
Take risks. When you're young, the cost of failure is so much less than when you're 60 something. Uh, you have so much
Yeah.
more time to recover. Take risks, get a mentor, learn everything you can, stay humble, because if you're not humble, it's harder to learn. And
Yeah.
just look for opportunities. And if you see one, think hard about it. If it's right for you, embrace it. If it doesn't work, go on to the next thing. But just stay hungry and take risks.
Yeah, for sure. I would concur with that. Boy, 100%. You know, there's nothing to lose when you're
Nope.
young. So, people, we want to thank you for joining us on the Grampian. And Dean, Tim, thank you so much for joining us here. We have appreciated it. Remember, the Beacom School of Business, usd.edu. And
/ business.
I can personally attest / business, and I can personally attest that my career was better having graduated from the University of South
Glad to hear
Dakota.
that.
Thanks again, Tim.
Thank you, Jim.
Grampian Nation, check it again. Please subscribe. Click you like it. Jump on board. This is Jim, and I am out. When you get an opportunity, subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcast.